Okay, Boker Tov, everybody. Welcome back. So we're on Daf Yud Tet now. Masechet Beitzah Daf Yud Tet Amud Aleph. We were looking at the sugya we started yesterday near the top of the page. Right, Tanu Rabbanan, second line. Tanu Rabbanan, Klishin et Mame Elef Yom Tov Ein Matbinan Tov Ben Hashmashot. We're dealing now with the question of Tfilat Kelim. This is going to conclude our discussion here about Tfilat Kelim on Yom Tov and Shabbat. But now we're talking about Ben Hashmashot of Yom Tov, a kli which became Tameh on Erev Yom Tov. Could you toiv that during Bein Hashmashot? And the Tanna Kama says no, you cannot. Rabbi Shimon Shazuri Amar Af B'choin Matbilin Oto. See, the question is, what is this issue of Bein Hashmashot? Meaning, Tanna Kama says you cannot toivel a kli, just as you cannot toivel a kli on Yom Tov itself. So too, Bein Hashmashot, since it's Safek Yom, Safek Laila, Bein Hashmashot may be considered Yom Tov. Therefore, you cannot toivel it then either. Rabbi Shimon Shazuri, on the other hand, says no. He says, Af b'cholen matbilin oto. He says this has got nothing to do with Yom Tov. Any day, any time during the week, during Bein Hashmashot, you cannot toivel a kli. Why? What is the problem of toiveling a kli Bein Hashmashot? Because we need the ha'arev shemesh. As we mentioned yesterday, this is a concept which comes up the very first daf in Shas. Okay, for those who are just joining, we're on the third line and daf Yud Tet Amud Aleph. It's not enough. It's not enough that the kli goes into the mikveh. You have to wait until the following day before it can be used for trumot, before it can be used for taharot again. And therefore, if you go and tovel a kli during Ben Hashmashot, we're worried that a person is not going to know, and a person is not going to realize they have to wait until the next day. Okay, so therefore. So therefore, Rabbi Shimon Shazori says you cannot toivel during Ben Hashmashot anytime. Says the Gemara, wait a minute, Tana Kama by Arev Shemesh, meaning this din, and as we'll see later on, this din of Arev Shemesh, not only is it agreed by everybody, it's actually explicit in the Psukim. It's going to be enough kamina from the fact that this is explicit in the Psukim, but it's written clearly, and everybody agrees. So doesn't Tana Kama hold that you need Arev Shemesh? Obviously he does. So how does the Tana Kama allow one to toivel a kli during Ben Hashmashot, right? Just before we go on to see the answer, let's see Rashi. So Rashi says, Ein matbilin oto Ben Hashmashot. Again, I'm skipping the first Rashi that deals with the previous sugya that we saw. Very, very long Rashi, the first one of the Amud. The next Dibur HaMatchil is Ein matbilin oto Ben Hashmashot. Okay, so he says, Ein matbilin oto Ben Hashmashot mipnei shu safek laila v'nimtza matbil b'yom tov. Right, that's the opinion of the Tanna Kama, that it might be night, and therefore you cannot toivel at it's equivalent to toiveling on Yom Tov. So Rabbi Shimon says Af B'chol, says Rashi Af B'chol, Im Anurim Adam Matbil Kli Ben Hashmashot. If we see a person who is toiveling a kli during Ben Hashmashot, and it's Tzurchin Lachziro V'lamchot b'yado, we have to go and we have to stop him. We have to protest, right? Not protest the way they were protesting on my street last night, but we have to go and protest and stop him from doing this. Because you need Harev Shemesh, you need the following night to pass. This person who is toiveling the kli at night, during Ben Hashmashot, which is we treat as night, he is certainly intending to use it now. He's not going to wait till the next day. It's still going to be tamei, and everything's going to become tamei, and that's going to be a problem. Therefore, that's why we don't allow it during the week, during Ben Hashmashot. So then Rashi says, Tanna Kama lo bai v'chorei b'tmiyah. The Gemara is wondering, how can it be? How can Tanna Kama not subscribe to this point as well? So back in the Gemara, we see the Tanna Kama lo bai Arev Shemesh. So Amar Rava. Ashkachtinu l'Rabbanan devei Rav deyatvi v'ka'amri b'machshavto nikeret mitoch ma'asav kamiflegei. Okay, so here is the first suggestion. Rava says, I heard the Rabbanan they were discussing, and they said here is maybe the machloket between Tanna Kama and Rabbi Shimon Shazuri is b'machshavto nikeret mitoch ma'asav kamiflegei. Okay, it's about this very specific case whereby can we say that from a person's actions we can discern what he had in mind? Again, our problem is that when we see a person who is toiveling the kli during Ben Hashmashot, and it's nightfall, so then we assume we assume that he doesn't know about Harev Shemesh, and we assume he's going to go to use the Kli that evening. Is there a scenario whereby we know from his actions, we can discern that he actually is not going to use it that evening, and then he knows about the halacha of Harev Shemesh? So that would be what the machloket is over here. Hey Chidami, what's the case? Right, you see a person who is holding the kli in their hand, nakit mana biyadei, and he's running. He's running during Ben Mashot to go and toivel it. Marsavai the karait va'azil meida yada the bayarev shemesh. Right. One opinion says, and this would be the Tanakama, that since you see that he's running, so why is he running? He's running to go and make it before Shkia. He's running to go and make it before Shkia, and therefore he knows that he has to toivla before Shkia. And if he doesn't toivla before Shkia, he's going to wait until the next day. But that's why he's running. There's not going to be any takala that's going to come out of that. Right. So if you see Rashi a little bit further down, it says Meida Yada Dabai Arev Shemesh. He says Vahainu the Rahit. So the fact that he's running, Kasavo Laspik Kodem Yitziat Hayom. He's running because he's trying to get there before Shkia. If he doesn't, what happens if he doesn't make it? If he only gets there after Shkia, so he's already come to the mikveh. He's not going to go home and have the same problem tomorrow. So he's going to toivel the kli. He's going to wait for Arev Shemesh until he can use it. He's going to wait until the next day. למחר, לקח בין השמשות דיום טוב אסור משום דמטביל ביום טוב שלא לצורך. Therefore, if it's on בין השמשות of Yom Tov, so you're toiveling it on Yom Tov, there's no need, right? You can't use it on Yom Tov, therefore that would not be allowed. אבל בכל לא מכינן בי, but on a weekday we won't protest. דמחשבתו ניכרת, because it's clear that his intent was, or that he had in mind, from the fact that he was running, that's what we know. So that's what the Tanakama would say, and Rabbi Shimon Shazuri would say back in the Gemara, the last of the narrow lines, right towards the end, he's just running because of his work, but he's not. He doesn't know. So that's what Rava heard the Talmidim discussing. And then the Gemara says, Rava says, Rava says that is incorrect. He says, and that is not the machloket between them. Everybody agrees on that point. See Rashi now towards the end of the narrow lines of Rashi. He says, the kule alma lo pligi, de bevadai nikeret beinish de alma. Right, we say normally we would say machshavtoni nikeret mitoch masav by most people. V'hai gavra de aflik be Rabbi Shimon Shazuri, and this person, this case that Rabbi Shimon Shazuri is arguing with Tanakama about, v'amad lo amrinan be machshavtoni nikeret mitoch masav. Okay, it's a different case. It's a different case that they're arguing about. And what is the case? Right, back in the Gemara, it says, right? His kli became tameh because it came into contact with, or he thinks that it became tameh. He's not sure if it became tameh. It came into contact with something that was smaller than an adasha, smaller than the size of a lentil. Right? That is the minimum size of the object that would contract tumah. So the atalakamei derabanan l'sheyule bepachot mika adashas. This person now is running. He's coming to the rabbi to ask him. He's saying, "I have this kli, and this kli came into contact with the sheret, but it was smaller than the size of a lentil. Is it going to be tamei now or not?" Now Rashi understands that actually the person has, meaning it's not a different case, but we are adding on to the previous case that we saw. The case is that the person is running to toivel his kli just before Ben Hashmashot, and he has another kli that he's asking about. See Rashi here, he says, "Kagondi tamele mana achrina bepachot mikadasha min hasheretz v'atel sheyule." In other words, the person has the one kli which he knows is vaday tamei, and he's on his way. He's running to the mikveh to go into toivel, but at the same time he's running to the Rav because he has a second kli. He says, "Rav, I'm going to take this kli to the mikveh, but I need to know if this one is. I need to know if it's tamei or not." Now, why should the fact that he's asking if it's become tamei because it came into contact with less than an adasha or not, what has that got to do with bein hashmashot? So it says like this, right? Right? He's coming to ask if less than a lentil size that becomes tamei or not. Okay, we're on the third line of the wide lines towards the end. Mar savar midahalo gamir harev shemesh nami lo gamir umar savar hau de lo gamir ha harev shemesh gamir. In other words, the Gemara is saying like this: Mar savar. The first opinion is midahalo gamir harev. Sorry, midahalo gamir harev shemesh nami lo gamir. Meaning, this person doesn't know the halacha of pechot mikadasha, a basic halacha in Hilchot Tumah v'Tahara, that something which is less than the size of a lentil that is not going to cause tumah. Now he doesn't know that halacha. He's coming to ask it. So the question is, when the person, yes, he was running before Ben Mashot, but we don't know why he's running. He's running because before Ben Mashot. He's running because he always runs, etc. But he's come to ask the shaila. From say Sheilat Chacham Chatzit Tshuva. From the shaila which a person asks, you can tell a lot about what the person knows, what the person. So the shaila that an Amaretz asks is not the same as the shaila which a Talmid Chacham comes and asks. So he's asking about this halacha of Pechot Mikadasha. So, how do we look at it? We could look at it like this. Everybody knows it's a basic halakha of Tumah and Tara. Nowadays, maybe people don't know as much because these halachot are not relevant. But in a time when these are, you have to remember that halachot Tumah and Tara, that was Orach Chaim. Right? That was the Orach Chaim of the Shulchan Aruch of those days. Okay, there was obviously no Shulchan Aruch, but that you understand the comparison. So he doesn't know this basic halakha of Pechot Mikadasha. So maybe he doesn't know the halacha of Harev Shemesh either, right? That's exactly that. That's the opinion of. That's what Rabbi Shimon Shazori is saying. He's saying midaha lo gamir. Since he comes and asks the shaila about Pechot Mikadasha, which is a basic halacha of Tuman Tahara, he doesn't know that. So Harev Shemesh nami lo gamir. If he hasn't learned that, he also obviously hasn't learned the basic halacha of Harev Shemesh, and therefore I'm concerned that he's going to go and he's not going to know. So Rav always has to know. When a person comes and asks a shaila, right? There's always the shaila that you get asked, and there's the shaila that you don't get asked. So very, very often you have to answer. Sometimes the chokhmah is to know when do you answer just what you've been asked and not what you haven't been asked, and when do you answer that what you haven't been asked, right? So it's very, very complicated. But so in this case, that's what Rabbi Shimon Shazuri is saying. He's saying this person comes, he's got his two kelim. He's coming, he's asked you about this one, about the Pechot Mikadasha. So you have to say, no, that one is not tamei, but you've got a problem with the other one. You can't go and toivel that now. You have to wait till tomorrow because of Harev Shemesh, right? You have to teach him that halacha. That is one opinion. The other opinion says, Mar Savar, how do you gamir Harev Shemesh gamir? What's one got to do with the other? Listen, a person knows there's a lot of there are many halachot in the Shulchan Aruch. Person learned a certain siman. He knows the others. He doesn't know the other siman, right? He missed the share that week when you were talking about Pachot Mikadasha. He missed that share, but he was at the share for Arev Shemesh. That's not necessarily right. So that's the other opinion that says the fact that he doesn't know that does not necessarily indicate that he doesn't know the other halacha as well. So if you see Rashi, why would you think, right? Is this halacha? He doesn't know that halacha. So Rashi says, "How de lo gamer?" The first one line of Rashi. He says, "De lo ktiv behedya bekadasha, aval arev shemesh behedya kitiv migmar gamer." Okay, the din of Harev Shemesh is written explicitly in the din of Kadasha that's learned out. Okay, but that's not explicitly in the Chumash. Our assumption is that we think most people know at least the psukim, even if they don't know the halachot. I don't know if today that assumption still stands, but in any event, you see in many places. For example, let me put on screen for you. One moment. Okay, so for example, if you see the pasuk, yeah, it says "V'chi amot min habema asher yilachem lochla nogeh b'nivlata yitma ad ha'arev." It's very familiar. This is in Parashat Shmini, right? Ad ha'arev. That teaches us that we need Harev Shemesh. That is something which is learned explicitly in the Psukim. So the opinion of Tanna Kama would be, yes, he doesn't know a basic halakha of Pachot Mikadasha, but he knows about Harev Shemesh because that's written in the Torah. That's explicit, and therefore that is the machlaket between them. Okay, so I wanted to show you here. There are some fascinating questions that come up in the Chashukei Chemed. Chashukei Chemed is Rav Zilberstein's, where he goes through essentially the different shilas which he has based on the daf. But sometimes the answer is based on the daf, sometimes the question is based on the daf, and it's printed in that way. So have a look here at some of the questions he has, which relate to our sugya. So he says here, Ama aretz shochel b'Pesach chametz shenimkar legoy. Yeah, sometimes you wonder if these are actual questions, or I think that the truth is stranger than fiction. You couldn't make up a question like this. He says, Sheila, a person who is not Amaretz, he's not particularly learned, but he's come to the Rav to sell his chametz for Pesach, right, as everybody does. Harav yodea she'am haaretz zeh savu shelachar shenimkar legoy mutar le'achol chametz b'Pesach. Right. So what does this person thinks? That when you sell, he thinks, okay, when you sell the chametz, then you can eat it. It's only the chametz of a Jew that you can't eat on Pesach, but the chametz of a Nochri you could eat. Why would a person think such a thing? We'll see in a moment exactly where this mistake came from. He said, but he thinks, Rach chametz Yisrael asul b'achila. Hata'ut nishtarsha etzlo, kevan she'aviv begeto machat hachametz legoy, kedei lachsoch isur bal yareh, aval achal chametz b'nei pikuach nefesh. Okay, so it's a tragic thing. Where did this come from? He was in the Holocaust. He was in the ghetto, and his father sold the chametz. Who was the guy he found in the ghetto to sell the chametz? I don't know, but that's the story. And he thought at least in those situations, there was a whole shut from the Holocaust, shut mimamakim of Oshri, with some fascinating and some tragic shilas that are in there, all sorts of things we couldn't imagine. But so he says they were able to sell the chametz so that they wouldn't transgress the Isur of Bal Yireh, but they had nothing else to eat, so they ate it because it was pikuach nefesh. Okay, so now he thinks, many years later, he thinks that this is the halacha. This individual thinks the halacha is if you sell your chametz, you can eat it. Okay, that's the mistake. So the question is, nistapek harav ech linhog. Ha'im imkor avuro chametz legoy. Should he now agree and sell the chametz, and therefore he won't transgress bal yira'eh, even though he's going to eat it, he's going to transgress the eating and isur karet, but nonetheless, at least he's saving him from that transgression. Right? He'll tell him. He'll tell him it's asur. You can't eat it. But maybe that's not enough. Maybe you could say the fact that the Rav will warn him is not enough. He's not going to listen. Maybe if the Rav is mishatef pula, if he agrees that he goes and he sells the chametz on his behalf, so now he's going to think. That's a hechsher, right? He's going to think now he can eat it. So what should he do? So answer says Rav Zilberstein, Tshuva Ne'emar Masechet Beitzah Daf Yutet Amud Aleph. Zeh asugya. He says, Tanu Rabbanan Klish Ne'emar Me'av Yom Tov Ein Mapilin Oto Ben Hashmashot Ve'echidami Kigon Dorat Va'azir Ben Hashmashot Latbulei Uperish Rashi Imanu Rim Adam Mapil Kli Ben Hashmashot צריכים להחזירו למחות בידו מפני שצריך הלב שמש. That's exactly what we've said. That if you see a person who is toiveling the Kli during Ben Hashmashot, you have to go and tell them they can't because they need to wait for Harev Shemesh. וזה מטביל כלי בלילה, ודאי דעתו להשתמש בו מיד, לא נתאים הערב, שמש של מחר. Okay, so that's Rashi. So he says, yeah, iksha tzlach, the tzlach, that's the Nonda B'Yehuda, asks the following question. He says, what's the case that we're talking about? B'may nafshach, b'may askinan, I b'mezid, she'odeh sh'asarich alev shemesh, he says, if this person, again, Rashi explained to me, the case says, I see a person, they're running to go and toivel the kli on Ben Hashmashot. I have to stop them from toiveling the kli because of Harev Shemesh. He says, what's the case? If it's b'mezid, meaning the person knows that there's a din of Harev Shemesh, and nonetheless they aren't going to wait, they're going to use it now, so then ma yoel shenimnayo milat bil. What good is it that we stop them from toiveling? If he's not going to listen to us, he knows the din of Harev Shemesh, maybe he'll just use it. He's not going to listen to us at all. He doesn't listen to what's explicit in the psukim. He's going to listen to us. Okay, that's if he's mazid. If you are at shogeg, that either the person doesn't know about the din of Harav Shemesh, so kasher lamanes olo atbila. Why do you have to stop him from toiveling? Just teach him the halacha. Tell him, okay, you can go, you can toivel your kli, but you're gonna have to wait till tomorrow. I tell you, nowadays we can say the reason is because if you tell him that, he's going to publish it on the internet. He's going to say Rav so and so said that you can go and toivel your kli, and you're not right. And I use very me'olam. But in any case, he says, why can't we just tell him? Yodia lo shetzarich al kol panim Harav Shemesh. So that's the question of the tzlach. And the tzlach says, לעת כזאת לא מצאתי בשתונות מחשבותיי כוונת הסוגיה על נכון עד כאן השונו. He says, I don't understand what case the Gemara can possibly be talking about. Again, if it's Mazid, the fact that you tell him is irrelevant. If it's Shogeg, why don't you just tell him? So he says, amazing Yesod. It says, B'Sefer Arot leMori Chami Zatzal, in the book of, that's Rav Eliashiv. Rav Eliashiv was Rav Zilberstein's father-in-law. He says, Rav Eliashiv answered the following: Tiretz, de Adam shekol yamei chayav shekol yamav chai be'anacha she'en tzarich harav shemesh lo yo'ilo adir. V'tzarich b'davka lemono milizbol ad kan hashno. He said, in other words, it's the power of habit. It's the power of hergel. You know, so many things we do in life are by habit or by instinct. There's a person who's lived his whole life and he is convinced that he doesn't live by this principle of Harav Shemesh. So you're going to tell him now, it's not going to make a difference. You have to stop him from doing the tefillah. Otherwise, he's just going to go back to doing what he always does. Okay, that was the answer Rav Eliashiv gave. But so then he says, Shamana mitirutze, she'adam shemushrash b'taut lo to'il ha'azara. Somebody who something is really entrenched in what they do, just telling them something is not going to help. Lo zot. And therefore, okay, so now he goes back to his original shaila. He says, "Im harav ro'eh sheta'ut hazot shechametz nemkal legoyim mutar b'chalav pesach mushreshet etzlo." Okay, this person Nebuch, but for 20 years, 30 years, 50 years, I don't know how long, his entire life, every year, he eats his chametz on Pesach. He sells it to the goy, and he eats it. He thinks it's okay. So if that's what's been so entrenched in his behavior, v'adiburim v'azbarim lo yo'elu, whatever you're going to say is not going to help. V'kasher yimkor avarot hachametz, yesh chashash yikasher la'aretz b'isur chilat chametz. And therefore, we're worried that by you going and selling him his chametz, you are going to cause him to stumble, to eat it. And therefore, adif shelo yimkor avaro, ki adiburim lo yo'elu. Therefore, it's better not to sell it. V'afal pi she'im ken yimkor inatzem yisur b'al yareh. Even though if you sell it, you'll prevent him from the yisur of bal yareh. Better to not sell it, and in that way we're hopeful that he won't eat it, and therefore he will not eat it, and he'll be saved from the yisur karet. Okay, he then says, you could challenge this. In our sugya in Beitza, the person doesn't lose anything from the fact that he's prevented from toiveling his kli. Right. In other words, here, the fact that we stop him from toiveling doesn't cause anything to happen. But yeah, if we don't sell the chametz, so then he's transgressing bal yara'eh. אבל אף על פי כן מאחר והסוגיה משמע שאי אפשר לסמוך על הדיבורים למעלה שיש בטעות אם כן עדיף שלא נקרא חמץ עבורו. He says, nonetheless, what emerges from this, from the way that we've learned the sugya, is that just by telling him something, it's not going to change his mistake, and therefore better not to sell his chametz. He then says something very, very interesting. I'll just say it outside without reading it. He says all that is selling it in front of him with his permission. But there's discussion. We know we have a principle in halakha of zachin adam shelo b'fanav, that you can do something without a person's knowledge if it is going to cause them a merit, not if it's going to cause them an obligation. It's going to be a schut and not a chovah. So, for example, that's why if let's say I'm going to somebody's house for Shabbos and I want to give them a gift, and strictly speaking, we shouldn't really make kinyanim on Shabbat. So before Shabbat, I want them to acquire the gift. So I give it to somebody else. I say, you lift up this object, and by lifting it up, you're acquiring it for such and such an individual. The person doesn't even know about it, but nonetheless, it becomes theirs. It's called zachin adam shelo b'fanav. So there are those who say that by selling the person's chametz, that's a schut for him, because at least he won't have the isur of bal yareh. So he says, in such a case, he says, if you can, the Rav can go. Ironic. The person came and said, will you sell my chametz? So the Rav has to say no, and then without his knowledge, go and sell it for him. Okay? So he doesn't do it in such a way that he's aware. He does it in such a way that he's not aware. And that way, hopefully, he won't transgress the Yisur of Bal Yareh or the Yisur of Achilat Chametz. Okay. Fascinating. Shaila. There are some others, but we'll stop there for the Chashukei Chemed for today. So let's just see the next part of the Gemara, going back, the last after the two dots, right, just before the Mishnah, we said, Matbilin migav legav. The Mishnah said, right, you can't toiv lekli on Yom Tov, but you can matbil migav legav or michavura lechavura. So what on earth does that mean? So it says, Tanu Rabbanan ketzad migav legav. What does it mean, migav legav? Really, it means from one purpose to another. So we say, harotzeh lasot gito al gav kado, the kado agav gito. So kad comes from the language of that refers to a person who is preparing olive oil, right? Gito refers to a person who is preparing wine from their grapes. You want to use these kelim for wine or for oil from one purpose to another. You had originally toiveled it with one designation in mind, and now you want to use it for the other designation. So you want to toivel it for that. You can do that on Yom Tov. That's fine. And the reason is because really you're already toiveled it from Tumah to Tara. You don't need to toivel it again. It's just a chumrah, and therefore that's okay. What about mechabura lechabura? So that is referring to these kelim you're going to use for the Korban Pesach. A person went and toiveled their kelim with the Korban Pesach. Before Pesach, you have to know, you have to be designated with a specific chabura of where you're going to eat it. So he says, Haya ochel b'chabura zu, v'rotzeh lechol okay, beforehand, person originally said, I want to be part of Chavura A, and now I want to be part of Chavura B. Okay, so again, since the kli has already been toiveled from Tumah to Tahara, you don't have to toivel it with a specific designation in mind of which Chavura it's going to be in. You're allowed to do that. So just to see Rashi, the last two Rashis before the Mishnah, he says, B'chavurazu al pischo, regarding Pesach. Vayat tameh, okay, left me in. He was tameh, or his kelim were tameh at the time. V'taval ledat ken, and he did the tefillah with a certain chavura in mind. Harashut biyado ein tzarech lachzor v'litbo. You don't have to go and toivel again. V'kamra matnitin im ba lachmir ulatbil. If a person wants to be machmir and he wants to go and toivel his kelim again, l'shem chavura acheret, matbil b'yom tov. That he can do on Yom Tov because there's no metakin kli. I'm not really doing anything. That is just a chumrah. Okay, Adkan. So Bezrat Hashem, next week we'll pick it up from the next Mishnah. Everybody have a wonderful day. Shabbat Shalom. Good week, and we'll see you then.
Shabbat Shalom. Thank you very much. Lovely share.